Alright, so today I am making a Sweet 16 themed cake where I pretty much just baked the cake and decorated it to be a sweet themed cake. So I just put a bunch of different sweets on top of it. This recipe that I'm using is actually from Yolanda with How to Cake It. Is her vanilla cake recipe, and I just altered it a little bit to get it to taste like strawberry cake. So you'll see here in the beginning, I am adding some room temperature butter and my sugar to a bowl. For all of the exact ingredients, I will link the original video below to her channel because she goes in good detail and she's just a whole lot better and has been doing it a lot longer than me. I'm just pretty much following what she does, but I'm just going to cream my butter and sugar together. This takes quite a minute, so I'm going to fast forward through most of it and then show you how it comes out a little bit lighter in the end. I think I do this for about 5 to 10 minutes. I'm not sure exactly the time, but I just do it until that butter is a little bit lighter in texture. And after that, I add my eggs one at a time. And then after I do the eggs, I go in and, oh, well, right here you can see where I'm scraping down my bowl. I do make sure to do that every so often. Just every time I add something and I do something, I scrape down my bowl before I start back at it again, just to make sure everything is incorporated. So after I do my butter and sugar, then I add my eggs. Like I said, one by one. You'll see I'm starting to add the eggs here. And once I have the eggs incorporated, then I go with my wet and my dry ingredients. I start with my dry ingredients and add a little bit in, and then I add some wet ingredients. And again, she explains why in the video, but you just don't want it to make a mess. So that's why you start with the dry ingredients first, and then you add some wet, and then you alternate until you're done ending it with the dry ingredients. I do pre-mix and pre-sift all of my dry ingredients together before I start baking. So that's why it looks like I may be adding just flour, but it's not flour, it's flour, salt, baking powder. I don't beat the eggs into the butter and sugar too much. I pretty much just make sure that it's incorporated and well mixed in before I go in with my flour mixture, and then my wet mixture, which is just milk, and then I add strawberry flavoring to the milk. I add about 6 drops to the milk, and then I add that into the cake mixture. Like I said before, I don't add a whole lot of the flavoring. I only add about 6 drops. I think I might have did 7 by accident just by doing that, but it doesn't take a lot. I don't want a very strong strawberry flavor. I do want you to be able to tell that it is supposed to be a strawberry cake. I have tried to come up with my own strawberry cake recipe. I have failed at it several times. I've even tried recipes from other people, and I just, for some reason, cannot make a naturally good tasting strawberry cake. I don't know. I'm going to keep trying at it, but until then, I'm going to do it this way. And you don't have to break down your recipe as many times as I did with the flour and the wet mixture. I'm just doing so because I'm using a hand mixer and it's easy to do so. You can most definitely add half of your flour mixture, mix that in, add all of your milk, mix that in, and add the rest of your flour. I just don't do that because this is a pretty big recipe. Well, it's not a too big recipe, but this recipe does make 2 cake layers in a, I want to say 10-inch pan, 9 or 10-inch pan. And it takes a lot of hand power doing it with just a hand mixer. But that's all I have for now. So that's what I'm working with until I can save up and get me a stand mixer. Now I'm going to come in and add my food coloring. This is just the Wilton pink food coloring. I don't add a lot because I don't want a very dark pink color. I just want a light pink color. So yeah, you're just going to see me add a little bit of that, get it mixed in, and then I'm going to transfer it to a pan. I do save, you're going to see it in a minute, I do save my butter wrappers. When I'm baking a cake, I sit them to the side. I don't throw them away because I use them to grease or butter the sides of my pans. And then I put a pre-measured piece of parchment paper at the bottom before I pour my cake into the pans.
Oh, y'all know what time it is. It's that vibe.
So once I get this cake batter into this pan, I'm going to put it into the oven at 350 degrees. My cake took about right around an hour for it to be completely done on the inside. You'll know it's done when you stick a knife or a cake tester or a wooden dowel in the center of the cake and it comes out clean. I'm just tapping this pan right now just to make sure that I have I make sure I have it spread out in the pan evenly, and then I'm going to bang it on the counter to get out most of the air bubbles. Put that in the oven, and then I'm going to let it cool down completely in the pan, and I actually let it sit overnight after I did. Once I took it out and I let it cool completely in the pan, I covered it in plastic wrap because it was really late at this point, and I knew I was going to finish this cake the next day anyway. So right here, you're going to see this the next day, and I'm taking that plastic wrap off of the cake, I'm just going to use a knife to make sure that the edges are separated from the pan. I'm going to turn that out onto a cake board, and then I'm going to proceed with leveling and cutting the cakes in half into 2 layers. Make sure you use a serrated knife when you're leveling your cakes or cutting cake, period. Anytime you cut bread or anything of the sort, cake, bread, whatever, you always want to use a serrated knife, because if you use anything other than a serrated knife, you're just going to smush the cake or smush the bread, whatever you're cutting. Then I'm using I think I'm going to try and find a link and link it below. I'm using a cake slicer, I think is what this called. I think it's from Wilton, but it might be from Amazon. I don't remember, but I'm using that to cut my cakes in half. It's just easier that way than doing it by hand. I'm going to simple syrup them. Now, simple syrup is just equal parts sugar and water. So if you're doing a cup, you do 1 cup of water, 1 cup of sugar. You bring it to a boil on the stove until the sugar is dissolved completely. And I'm using that to sprinkle on top of my cakes to pretty much soak my cakes, because these cakes are pretty dense. So in other words, they're kind of thick. So to keep its moisture, I use simple syrup on them, just like Yolanda does in the video. But I do this with all my other with all my recipes as well. This cake recipe, it just so happens to be my vanilla cake recipe is not my vanilla cake recipe. It's the only recipe that I have that I borrowed from someone else. Any other cake that I make, I try to I come up with that from scratch. But yeah, so I just put a thin layer of, right here I'm going into decorating, I put a thin layer of some buttercream on the cake. And I apologize because I did not realize that a lot of this was not in frame. But what I'm doing right here is I'm just putting like a border, like a fence around this layer of cake. And I'm going to put I use strawberry preserves, and I just blend it to make sure all the strawberries are, so I have whole pieces of strawberries. I put a little bit of that on the cake, and then I spread it out. And then I put another cake layer on top of that. And I just keep building that up until I have all 4 layers stacked that way. And then I'm going to crumb coat. When you crumb coat, you just use a little bit of buttercream around the outside of whatever kind of icing that you're using. I just so happen to be using a simple buttercream recipe. Just butter and powdered sugar and a little bit of milk. And get a thin coat of that around the outside of the cake. Put that in the refrigerator to set, and then I'm going to take it back out of the refrigerator to ice the cake completely. Right here is me starting the crumb coat, but again, like I said, you can't see a lot of what I'm doing because I didn't realize that I was that much out of frame. But yeah, just kind of watch and see what I'm doing here. But if you need a better video, just check out the video in the description. I really love her. I really love her videos. She has inspired me to try and start making my own cakes. So yeah, just check that video out and just watch what I do here. I'm using a piping bag with some of that same buttercream inside of it to get that buttercream on the sides of the cake, so that I can start spreading it out. And then I'm going to use a bench scraper to get that icing around the outside smooth. At this point right here, my cake has already been chilled, so my crumb coat is set. So yeah, and I don't ice the top of the cake too much because I'm just going to put a whole lot of decorations on top of it anyway. So I'm just going to ice the sides and then put a little bit across the top, and then I'm going to decorate it in a few minutes, and you'll see how I do that. And I know my cake is off-centered on the board. I did realize that when it was a little bit too late, but I do fix it at the end before I give her the cake. And the cake was completely set. I made sure to slide the cake over on the cake board and make sure they're secure before I gave it to her. I'm just making some little, I don't know what these are called. I just had a piping bag with a round tip with the circle tip at the end of it, and I squeezed down, pulled up, and they made these little like Hershey Kiss looking designs. So I'm going to do that right here around the entire border, or the entire border top of the cake. Then I'm going to put some sprinkles down. And then pretty much after that, I just take whatever sweets I bought. I think I had some marshmallows, I had some mini cupcakes, some macaroons, I had a donut and a big lollipop, and I used those things as well as some buttercream to stick that stuff down to the top of the cake. Once I'm completely done with that, I put it back in the fridge to set before I gave it to my friend who it was for her sister's birthday. And that is pretty much it. So just watch me finish off this cake, look at the reveal shots. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.